Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the gradient-intercept form, and this is exercise 9G. This is a very important lesson where we're really going to be summarizing everything that we've seen thus far in this unit. We're going to be talking about gradient. We're going to be talking about intercepts. We're going to be talking about the two components of a linear rule. Very, very important stuff. I need your full attention. What are our learning intentions? To be able to determine the gradient and y-intercept for the graph of a rule in the form y is equal to mx plus c. To be able to determine the rule for a graph where the y-intercept is visible and the gradient can be determined. And then finally, to be able to determine the rule for a horizontal or vertical line. Let's begin by talking about the gradient-intercept form. And this is it right here. This is my gradient-intercept form of a linear rule. It's the gradient-intercept form. Y is equal to mx plus c. This is something you need to burn into your brains. Y is equal to mx plus c. This is a linear rule. And we've actually seen it before. We know that a linear rule is made up of two components. It has the coefficient of x. And we're just calling the coefficient of x the pronumeral m. That's all we're doing here. We're just saying, you know what, let the coefficient of x be represented by the pronumeral m. And what we're going to be seeing in this lesson is that m, the coefficient of x, is going to be the gradient of the line. Now, the other component of a linear rule, which we've seen in previous lessons, is the constant term. And all we're going to be doing is letting that be represented by the letter c. So the pronumeral c is representing my constant term. And what we're going to be seeing in this lesson is that c, the constant term, is in fact the y-intercept of the line. That's what we're going to be seeing in this lesson. Okay, let's now launch into example here to prove to ourselves, to prove that m is the gradient and c is the y-intercept. So we want to prove this to ourselves. So here is a graph, and here is the corresponding table of values for it. Let's begin by filling out the table of values. And again, we've done this before. All right, when x is -1, my y is -1. And sure enough, when x is -1, y is -1. When x is 0, y is 1. When x is 0, y is 1. 0, 1. Makes sense. When x is 1, what is my y value? When x is 1, my y value is 3. 1, 3. That can also be represented by the coordinate 1, 3. When x is 2, what is my y value? When x is 2, my y value is 5. 2, 5. 2, 5 can be represented as the coordinates 2, 5. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to determine the coefficient of x. The way in which we determine the coefficient of x is we say, well, because my x is increasing by 1 each time, what is the difference in my y values? Well, as you can see, from -1 to 1, that's plus 2. From 1 to 3, that's plus 2. From 3 to 5, that's plus 2. I'm plussing 2 each time. So that means my coefficient of x is going to be 2. The way in which you find the other component of a linear rule is the constant term. And what you want to look for is when x is 0, what is your y value equal to? When x is 0, my y value is 1. So I put a 1 there. We could write this a bit nicer, just so it's a bit cleaner here. What we're saying here is that my y is equal to 2x plus 1. That's what we're saying. Now, notice how this is in the form of my gradient-intercept form. So my m is 2 and my c is 1. So here I have y is equal to mx plus c, when my m value is 2 and my c value is 1. So what I have just told you is that my m value, 2, is my gradient. Can we now prove that to ourselves? Can we prove to ourselves that our gradient is 2? Because that's what it's saying to us. Well, how do we find the gradient? What is the gradient? My gradient is the steepness of the line, the slope of the line, and you find it by taking the rise and run. Let's pick two random points on the line, 1 and 1. We're going to find what the rise and the run is. My rise is 1, 2, 3, 4. My run is 1, 2. My run is 2. So that means I put a 4 here and I put a 2 there. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Would you look at that? Would you look at that? 2, which is my m value, which is my gradient, is in fact equal to 2. So now we can summarize this really nicely. We can write the following, and I want you to write this down because this is the important part. And I'll write it in orange. Oh, if I can get the orange. The coefficient of x is the gradient, and I'm going to put an m in brackets there, of the line. There it is. The coefficient of x is the gradient m of the line. That's the important thing. My m is my gradient. We now move on to the next one, which is saying that my constant term, which is 1, should be my y-intercept. So that means my y-intercept should be 1. Well, let's look at our graph. There's our y-intercept. What is my y-intercept? It's 1. My y-intercept is 1. So this checks out. This is true. The constant term here, so this 1, was my y-intercept. Now, let's think about why this makes sense. I know that my y-intercept occurs when x is equal to 0. Well, let's think about how we found the constant term. We said, well, when x is equal to 0, what is my y value equal to? That's what we did. So that's how we know that this is in fact true. We could also solve this algebraically. I could say that I've got the line y is equal to 2x plus 1, so just taking it from up here. I could then put 0 into the x spot, and then I'm going to get 2 times 0 is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1. And just like that, I've shown you that my constant, which is my y-intercept, is equal to 1. So let's write this in a nice little line here, like we did to the left. We're going to say the constant term is the y-intercept. And that is the pronumeral c. And we'll go right of the line. So there it is right there. The constant term is the y-intercept, c of the line. So the constant term, which is c, is the y-intercept. Pretty cool stuff right there. So you can see how this is kind of bringing together everything that we've seen thus far. We're talking about gradient. We're talking about intercepts. We're talking about the two components of the line. All very important stuff. If you feel like you've got a good grasp of this, I want you to pause the video and see if you can do this example for yourself. And see if you can figure out what the m and y values, the m and c values are, which are your gradient and y-intercept. If you're still feeling a bit shaky on this, I'm going to go through this example with you. All right, feel free to pause and see if you get it right. Okay, so what we're now going to do is we're going to begin by filling out our table of values. Let's do that. When x is -2, y is 3, and there you got -2, 3. When x is -1, my y is 0. When x is 0, my y is -3. And when x is 1, y is -6. Now, let's find the two components of the line. Let's find the coefficient of x and the constant. Because my x is increasing by 1 each time, what is the difference in my y values? Well, I'm going from 3 to 0, that's minusing 3. From 0 to 3, that's minusing 3. From -3 to -6, that's minusing 3. It's going to be -3 here. To find what my constant term is going to be, I'm going to say, well, when x is 0, what is my y value equal to? It's also -3. So now, I could write this out a bit nicer. I could say that my y is equal to -3x minus 3. And remember, actually let me do that as well. What I'm saying here, because this is in my gradient y-intercept form, I wanted that to be red. My m value is -3, and here my c value is also -3. All right, let's now prove to ourselves that m is my gradient and therefore should be equal to -3. So m is my gradient. My gradient is my rise. Oh, and actually, let's do this in orange just to keep things. Otherwise, everything's in red. It's all a bit ugly, is it not? M is my gradient. My gradient is my rise over my run. Let's take 2 points. Let's take this point. Let's take this point. What is my rise? What is my run? My run is 1, 2, 2. My rise, now what is my rise here? I'm going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My rise is -6. So my rise is -6. My run is 2, which means -6 divided by 2 is -3. I want to pause for a moment and reflect on the fact that my answer is negative and why it makes sense that it's negative. Remember in our last lesson when we spoke about positive and negative gradients, what we said is what you want to do is look left to right of your graph and see whether or not it's going up or down. Well, it's quite clearly here, if I look from left to right, that this line is going down. And that's why we get a -3 here. So we said that the rise was going down by 6. And that's how we could get to a negative as well. But just important that you're really taking note of whether or not your gradient is positive or negative. So here we have proved that my m is -3. Now, what about my y-intercept? Let's rub out all of this working here. It's just a bit messy, isn't it? Okay, what is my y-intercept? My y-intercept, according to this, should be -3. And sure enough, there's my y-intercept. It is equal to -3. Let's reflect upon why this makes sense. My y-intercept occurs when x is equal to 0. And that's what we did when we were finding a constant term. We said when x is equal to 0, what is my y-intercept? It's -3. Therefore, I could take this right here, y is equal to -3x minus 3. I could sub x equals 0 in -3 times 0 is 0. Y is equal to -3. Therefore, my c value is -3. And that is once again proving it to you how you do this. The gradient y-intercept form. And I've actually written it again here. This is important, everyone. That's why I've rewritten it. The gradient intercept form. M is the gradient. The C is the y-intercept. So now, if we got a question like this, which says state the gradient and y-intercept for the graphs of these rules. Well, we're going to remember that this is in the form y is equal to mx plus c. So this is my m value, this is my c value. My m value is 2, so my gradient is 2. My c value is 3. So that means my y-intercept is 3. So my m value, that is my gradient. Actually, let me write it again. My gradient is my m value, and my m value is equal to 2. My y-intercept is my c value, and my c value here is equal to 3. So we could keep on going. What is my gradient here? Well, this is my m value, this is my c value. My m, which is my gradient, is 1/3. My c value, now you have to include the sign in front of it. It's -4. That's my y-intercept. Then lastly here, this is my m, this is my c. My m is -5. Whoa, that's an ugly looking 5. And then my c is -7. Again, make sure you're including that sign in front of it. And that's how you do it, everyone. That is how you do it. Pretty cool stuff in how you can do this. Your gradient is your m value, your y-intercept is your c value. Okay, and look, it's so important. I've written it again. Have you burnt it into your brains yet? Hopefully you have. That your gradient intercept form is y equals mx plus c. M is your gradient. C is your y-intercept. Okay, here it's asking us to find the rule for these graphs by finding the values of m and c. Okay, let's have a look. I have to find the values of m and c. I know that m is my gradient. I know that I find my gradient by considering the rise over the run. Let's take 2 points, and they've given us 2 points. How nice of them, 1 and 3. What is my rise? What is my run? Well, my run here is just the horizontal distance, just 1. And my rise here is 1, 2, 3, 4. So my answer to this is going to be, I'm going to put a 4 into my rise, a 1 into my run, it will be 4. Then I need to find what my c value is. My c value is my y-intercept. This isn't tricky. I just need to look where my y-intercept is. There it is. My y-intercept is -1. So now, what I can do is I can say y is equal to mx plus c. My m value is 4, so that goes there. My c value is -1. Now, it's important, you have to write it like that, -1. So that is how you do it. That is your answer to the first one. Let's now move on to our next one. Again, what you want to find is your m and c values. What is my m value? My m is my gradient. My gradient is rise over run. Okay, so I'm starting here and I'm going there. My rise here is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's -4. I'm going down -4, and my run is 1, 2. So -4 down, 2 across. So it's going to be -2 as my gradient there. Also important to note, you could have realized that your gradient had to be negative because you're looking at it from left to right. It's going down. So you knew that your gradient had to be negative. The other thing you need to consider is what your y-intercept is going to be, which is your c value. So what is your y-intercept? Here it is. That's your y-int. So that's going to be 4. Now, we remember, we've got y is equal to mx plus c. My m value is -2. My c value is 4. And that's how we do it. That's my answer. So just be careful with how you're approaching these questions and work through them methodically. We've got a bit more to go here. Okay, the next thing we have to do is, and we've actually done this before, we have to talk about the rules for horizontal lines and vertical lines. We know a horizontal line has a rule y is equal to c and m is equal to 0. So remember, a horizontal line is just a line that goes through the y-axis. So that means y is just going to be equal to your y-intercept. So here, do you see how your y-intercept is 5? So that means y is equal to 5. And of course, your gradient is equal to 0. We learned about that in our last lesson, that horizontal lines have a gradient of 0. So another way of writing this would be y is equal to 0x plus 5. Because my gradient is 0, so my m is 0, and then 0 times x is just 0, so it's just y is equal to 5. So to over here, this would be y is equal to, remember, mx plus c. Well, my c value is -4, and my m value, my gradient is 0. 0x minus 4, 0 is equal to -4. Just like that. So nothing too crazy there. The vertical line is a little bit different. A vertical line has a rule, the rule x is equal to k. All you have to do here, don't think about it too hard, is that if you've got a vertical line, it's going to be in the form of x is equal to, and then whatever your x-intercept is going to be. So here I'm going through 4, so it's x is equal to 4. Here I'm going through -2, so it's x is equal to -2. All right, let's keep on going here. It says find the rules for the following. So this is a horizontal line, so it's going to be y is equal to -3, just what it's going through. Here it's going to be x is equal to 7, because it's a vertical line going through 7. This is going to be x is equal to -4, because it's a vertical line going through -4. And this is going to be y is equal to 2, because it's a horizontal line going through 2. And that's all we really have to know there. So don't get too freaked out about that. All right, that's it for this lesson. If you want, here is another example that you can work through. It's just a bit more practice. If you're finding it hard to do this, finding the m and c values and finding the rule when you're given the graph. So if you're having trouble with this, I'm going to go through another one of these examples with you here. But if you're feeling all good, you are free to go and begin 9G. But if you're struggling, stay with me and I'll work through that final example with you. So if you're all good, you can leave. Okay, so if you're still here with me, it just means you need a bit of extra help in figuring out the m and c values here. So let's have a go at this question here. So it says find the rule for these graphs by finding the values m and c. My m is my gradient. My gradient is my rise over my run. Now, here is my rise. Here is my run. Do you see how it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? It's 6 down. And then it's 1, 2 across. It's -2. Oh, sorry, it's 2 across, just 2. So that means I put a -6 here. I put a 2 there. It's going to be -3. I want you to take note of the fact that I could have told you that this was going to be negative because moving left to right, it's going down. It's going down moving left to right. So even though we said the rise was -6, I knew that the answer had to be negative anyway because going left to right is going down. The next thing that we have to talk about is the C value. And this is my Y-intercept. This one's easier to find. It's just this. It's going to be, that's my Y-intercept. It's 6. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remind myself that it's y is equal to mx plus c. My -3 is my m value. My 6 is my c value. I just sub those points in. Y is equal to -3x plus 6. That's an ugly looking x. Let's try that again. And that's how you do it. Hopefully that makes a bit more sense. If you're still having a bit of trouble with it, make sure you come speak to me when you're doing your exercise and get some help. All right, that is it. I will see you in the next video.